Okay, you watched some Netflix. What did you watch on the net of flicks? What's that? Criminal Minds. All right, cool. What about you, Stanley? I can't hear you. You're gonna have to scream. Okay. Anything interesting that I need to learn about on the net of the flicks? Which one? What's that? Total Drama Ireland? Oh, nice. Nice. Samuel. Ooh. Nice. Where'd you do that at? Someone's house or? Oh. Okay, good. Brooke. Hey, everybody here on the Zoomers. You are all going to put in the chat function one thing you did this weekend that you enjoyed that was not sleep. So something else other than sleep. Brooke, go ahead. Volleyball practice. We've had Netflix, volleyball practice, hanging with a small group of friends. And the Janes? What? One person watched Imposters, one person watched Crazy Island or Adventure Island. What's it? Total Drama Island. And somebody else watched Criminal Minds. And Mr. Brunette, what did I watch? I watched the Bad News Bears. It was really bad, and I stayed up way too late. I also lost to my wife in a card game that I haven't lost in like 5 years in. So I had a little frustration on Saturday night. I might get a rematch tonight, though, so I'm pretty pumped about that. AC Doocy. It's for old people. My grandpa taught me how to play it before he died. And it's kind of like gin rummy. It's cool, though. It is it's fun. All right. Everybody needs to get out there, open up their Canvas page, and then you can either upload the notes from the module that we're on, or you can elect to just look at my screen. And I saw somebody, who was it? I saw when I was observing Mr. Renshaw today rock out on absolutism. He was talking about the Habsburg chin. You guys remember that? So gross. It's really creepy, honestly. But he started talking about it, and I noticed someone was on their cool little thing, their computer, using like this red circle thing and like taking notes that way with like a stylist, I think is what it's called. I thought that was interesting. Let's see, who did the coolest things? Griffin watched football. Yep, I did a little bit of that too. Lucy McJunkins, what game did you play with Katya? Here, so you guys know what's going on.
We were playing horror games.
War games?
Horror games.
Horror games. Oh, like who killed who?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Rollerblading. There you go. Hopefully you didn't fall on the ice. All right. Good stuff, folks. Those of you who are participating, gotta love that. All right, so today is the day. This is a good day. It's a fun one. We get to talk about the start of World War I, the war to end all wars. Okay, also known as the Great War, and the whole irony behind it is, again, the war to end all wars. What's the irony behind that, Samuel? Yeah, whoa. Sorry. There was another war like 20 years later, right? Called World War II. No, you didn't. Yes, you did. Okay, so the war to end all wars. This is 69. This is 69 slides. I have condensed it. There's a lot to talk about. So, for those of you on the Zoom, okay, do your best here. I'll try to do some breaks and learning breaks and all that, but we really need to just kind of get going. All right. So, again, the irony is in the year 1914, all the great powers of Europe, which had taken over big areas of the world, thought it would be a pleasurable experience to test all of their new weapons and go to war. So we call this, and what I'm going to kind of touch base on here is the 4 main causes of World War I. Okay. So if you want to jot this down, you're just looking at it. You probably maybe learned it in middle school. Some have, some haven't, some probably forgot it. But main is the easiest way to remember: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Okay, acronym for the causes of World War I. So today we're going to focus on the road to war and then how it went down. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about tomorrow we're going to talk about how it was a global war. And then the technology, total warfare. Thursday we're going to hit on the U.S. and talk about the Spanish flu. It's killed 30 million people, which is amazing. And then we'll try to wrap it up on Friday if possible. I don't know how it's going to go, but I think everything's possible if you put your mind to it and you don't talk too much. All right, so 4 main causes. All right, first off, militarism. Okay, so now you're going to be looking at some documents, and you're going to see that European militaries doubled in size in a short period of time from 1890 to 1914. Okay, when your military doubles in size and you're in the midst of a second industrial revolution, that's scary. Okay, and I'm not talking about just doubling in size in like the amount of guns that they had, but just the size in terms of people and money they were putting into it. Okay, alliances. Hopefully you got this right on the quiz. If you didn't, you probably saw why you missed it. Okay, 1882. Originally, the Triple Alliance was Germany, Italy, and then what's known as Austria-Hungary. I'm sure some of you are going, Mr. Burnett, where is this Hungary come out of Austria? Well, during the revolutions of 1848, the people of Hungary protested, and so Austria had to allow them to have their own separate legislative body, and it became the Austria-Hungarian Empire, not just the Austrian Empire anymore. But the same family, the Habsburgs, who had controlled Austria for hundreds of years, still controlled Austria. Yeah, the easiest way to remember that is the word alliance isn't French. Okay? Also then, when war broke out, remember, Italy flipped sides because they were still in a feud over very, 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 very valuable land in northern Italy today, like Milan, the city of Milan. If you ever heard of the city of Turin or Torino, where the soccer team Juventus plays, that is that land is valuable, and Austria had taken that from Italy. Okay, the Triple Entente. This was a defensive alliance made up of France, Great Britain or England, and Russia. Most of you around the room are going, Mr. Burnett, this doesn't make sense. Why would Russia be allies with Great Britain and France when they had embarrassed them 55 years earlier in the Crimean War, right? Well, you forget things, especially when Germany becomes basically like a 3-headed monster and you're terrified that Germany is going to invade you. You figure if you make allies with the countries that neighbor Germany, you might have a chance, right? So that was a defensive alliance where if you touch me, what am I going to do to you? Or if you hit me first, then I'm not just going to hit you. All my friends are going to hit you at the same time. Okay? You guys get that? Snowball effect. All right, imperialism. We've already touched on this. There isn't much area in the world left to imperialize. Okay, by the time you get to the late 1800s, you also have other countries jumping in, trying to raid or rain on England's parade, like the Japanese, right? And so China's being torn to shreds. It is likely that something's going to happen. All right, lastly then, nationalism is pride in your own country, okay? And so there were a lot of countries and types of people called ethnic groups that did not have their own independence, that wanted their own independence, okay? particularly in an area known as the Balkan Peninsula, which we'll look at here shortly. Okay. You've got basically as the Ottoman Empire kind of fell out of Europe, if you remember right, in the 1800s, Serbia gained its independence. The Greeks gained its independence. Other strong nations are going to want to fill in that power gap, okay, especially because it gives you access to Constantinople and trade in the Black Sea and then in the Mediterranean. All right, so MAIN. We're going to read a little bit more about that tonight. This is pretty self-explanatory, though. If you look on the map, you should see that you've got the gray area, which is the Entente. That just means union in French, I think. I'm not a perfect French speaker. I try. And you have the Entente sandwiched in here, or sandwiching in the what are we known as the Central Powers or the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. Okay? So, all right, we'll take a break for a second here. This is a quote. It's a good one. I want somebody on Zoom to unmute, and I want you to read this as loud as you possibly can. It's from Frederick Passy in the year 1895, 20 years before World War I breaks out. So, who on Zoom wants to either raise their hand, give me a thumbs up or something, unmute, and do it very loudly? I got someone in the chat. I have some people asking about this main causes. I haven't assigned it yet. It's tonight. Okay. Anybody else want to read this? Lucy McJunkins, real loud, please.
Okay. The entire able-bodied population is preparing to massacre one another, though no one, it is true, wants to attack, and everybody protests his love of peace and determination to maintain it. Yet the whole world feels that it only requires some unforeseen incident, some unpreventable accident, for the spark to fall in a flash and blow Europe sky high.
All right, so couple important things here that Mr. Passy is saying. What are they? Let's go first off. The entire able-bodied population is preparing to kill one another. Is that a good thing? Probably not. Though everyone is saying that they want to be peaceful and they are determining to be peaceful. But it's only going to require some unforeseen incident or some unpreventable accident for the spark to fall and create an explosion. What is the spark, Sam? You know? What's that?
The spark for the explosion.
Yeah, what's the spark for the explosion? You don't know? Hannah Hiddle, what is it?
Is it the assassination of the political guy, Nick Ferdinand?
The assassination of the political guy. That's the correct answer. So, it is, but it goes a little bit deeper than that, but that's correct. That is the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So, let's take a look at this slide right here, okay? This should look a little bit familiar. This is the Balkan Peninsula, okay? And then on the bottom, you have Greece. You can see what's known as the Dardanelles, the Bosporus Strait, and you can see Constantinople, or it's almost on the map, okay? Now, if you direct your attention to the middle where there's this big blob of junk, okay, right here, what do you notice about this? Ashton, what do you notice about that?
There's a lot of different people in the same area.
Lot of different people in the same area. The green, light green, represents Muslims. Okay? The pink represents Serbians, ethnic Serbians who are Christians, Orthodox. The yellow represents Croats, or today what we would call a Croatian. And they are Roman Catholic. Okay? And the white represents a non-majority. So, Why is it likely that the spark, if it lands here, is going to cause an explosion? What do you think? Yes. Yes. So many people in that area, and they all want different things. They all have different ideas for how they should be a country and or how they see the future moving forward here. Okay. And they don't see it as massive empires anymore. And Austria-Hungary is determined to remain an empire as all the other large powers like Germany, France, Britain are claiming land. Okay. You'll notice, I want you to see one more time here, the importance of Russia also, saying that Russia claimed it was the father of the Slavic people. And that meant that the Balkan Peninsula was made up of Slavs, Eastern Orthodox religion. Remember that? Remnants of the Byzantine Empire. So Russia here also thinks that they should be involved in this. And remember, Russia was always trying to gain more warm water ports on the Black Sea. Okay, if you look up on the board right here, it's pretty obvious. Okay, so the spark then is going to occur in a kind of a strange manner. I believe it's Naradgi Kranov, but don't my Serbian is not so good. Okay, but translated into English, it's called the Black Hand. Okay, this was a secret service or a secret society of young men who lived in Serbia, but were being trained by the Serbian military to try to stage a coup or an overthrow of the Austria-Hungarian Empire so that they could claim Bosnia. Bosnia is an area that has a lot of Muslims. Okay, claim that for themselves. And they wanted this to be the Slavic homeland. Okay? So, what comes out or what happens later on in history, what we figure out is that this group of terrorists were actually being paid for by the Serbian government. This wasn't immediate knowledge at the time, though. Okay? Secondly, we know that Serbia has a blank check from Russia saying that Serbia will get protection from Russia. So keep that in mind. Now, this kind of takes us to another complicated part of this story, to this guy by the name of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, not the band that had made like one good song in the early 2000s, okay? The actual person, okay? He was the Archduke, which means he's the next in line to take over the Austria-Hungarian Empire. Okay, so think of them in terms of like top 10 most important people in the world. Succession-wise, going to take over one of the most famous empires ever in history. Okay, and he was a moderate. Okay, this guy was actually willing to listen to the Serbians and this idea that Bosnia-Herzegovina could be a separate country or part of Serbia. His father, though, Franz Josef, was a traditional Habsburg who saw them as the elites and wanted Bosnia-Herzegovina to be part of his empire. Okay? And so his father also was mad at him because he married a mid-level German noblewoman by the name of Sophia. And he thought she was ugly. Okay? And so he would not let his son, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, bring her to Vienna, the royal capital of the Habsburgs. They had to actually live in Germany, the castle in Germany, okay, because he didn't approve of her. So he gets invited to come see on a national holiday for Serbia, okay? He gets invited to come and watch a military demonstration, okay, celebrating their Slavic, or actually, sorry, it's in Bosnia-Herzegovina, but they're celebrating their Slavic traditions, and he gets invited to watch some military maneuvers. Okay. At the same time, Franz Ferdinand looks at it as a way to get his wife in a royal setting that's not in Vienna. Okay, that's a big deal. Remember, that's powerful. You want your wife to be included. Okay, you're not married yet, and you maybe aren't in serious relationships. When you do, it's not cool when your father-in-law calls you ugly and doesn't invite you to the house. Okay, that you grew up in your whole life, that your relatives have lived in for thousands of years or 1,000 years at this point. You guys get what I'm saying? Parker, you understand this? You see why he would want to bring his wife with him? Yeah? Okay, so he brings his wife with him, and when he brings his wife here, they decide that they're going to travel in an open-aired, what's it called? A car that has no top, a convertible. They are in an open-air convertible here, and they decide that they are going to take it down the street. And the unforeseen incident that Passy was referring to 20 years later occurs, and this is a big date. Jot this date down. June 28th, 1914. Archduke, okay, is driving down the main street in Sarajevo. He's got security in front of him, security behind him, in cars and convertibles also. An assassination attempt is made on his life. A guy runs out and chucks a homemade hand grenade at his car. Franz Ferdinand swats it. Yao Ming's it. All right? Sends it back to China. The bomb lands, it explodes, and it injures two of his bodyguards in the car behind him. The man who throws it jumps in the river and takes a cyanide pill. But the river was only like 2.5 feet deep, and the cyanide was old, and he didn't die. So they're able to capture this guy who tried to kill him. Now, what does Franz Ferdinand do? Like the dumb, kind of naive man he is, he continues to the town square, gives his speech, and then instead of going back to the railroad station to go home, he wants to go see his guards who are in the hospital to wish them well wishes. So he goes down a separate street path that did not have protection. And they make a wrong turn. And it is there that the most famous sandwich in the whole world was never eaten. Why? It might have been a bratwurst. Could have been a sandwich. It was at some kind of deli. This guy, Gavrilo Princeps, who's a 20-year-old, again, from Serbia, who's part of this terrorist association, is eating a sandwich. He sees this convertible do a U-turn, and he walks out of the deli and shoots the Archduke and the wife, Sophia, right on the spot. No protection. Okay? Blows his brains out. Die right there. Okay? And this was the spark, okay, that got the whole thing going. All right? Gavrilo Princeps later would be accosted, taken to jail, and then it was known that he was being trained by Serbia, and that the secret association is actually connected to Serbia. This is the actual picture, okay? I mean, not making this up. This is his mugshot. He would die of the Spanish flu disease right towards the end of the war in jail. Now, the spark then to blow Europe up sky high looks like this. This gets super confusing. So try to stay along with me. Those of you that are on Zoom and in person, I can see your eyes already starting to go back into your heads. Okay? Here we go. That killing was June 28th. After that happens, and again, I want to say in spite of that happening, because the Archduke was warned 7 times by the Serbian embassy not to go to Bosnia-Herzegovina and Sarajevo that day, that there would most likely be an attempt on his life. They ignored all of them. So after that killing, Franz Josef, who's the emperor of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, sends a message, or his diplomat send a message to the King of Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II, and says, do you have our back unconditionally? This was the quiz question that dealt with the blank check. Does anyone know what a blank check is? What's a blank check? Yes, when you're willing to let someone else write the numbers in when you give them a check. So essentially, the blank check theory here is that when Austria asked Germany for their support, Germany said, we will unconditionally support you, meaning they can do whatever they want. And so they issue what's known as the list of 10 demands, which in your primary source work this week is going to be called the July ultimatum. All right. And I'm going to let you read through this on your own tomorrow. But basically, the demands were that the Austria-Hungary could now occupy Serbia, go in and root out all the people that were connected to this secret association, go into its schools and make sure that they weren't teaching propaganda against the Austria-Hungarian Empire, and basically tell them that they can't be nationalistic. Is anyone going to want to agree to that? No. Also, on top of that, Serbia has a big fat gun in their pocket. What's the big fat gun that they're holding, Ashton? Russia. So Serbia has Russia in its back pocket, and Austria has Germany in its back pocket. So what's going to happen? Well, when Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, a month later, July 28th, Russia had already mobilized its troops. Mobilize means to prepare its troops and move them to the border. So Russia had already moved its troops to the German border, okay, before the war was declared. Then when Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia because they don't accept all the demands, that's when we call it the domino effect. That's when the European powder keg explodes, goes up in air, okay? Here's how it's called. Then it's called the Guns of August. So immediately, Germany declares war on August 1st, 1914, okay, on Russia, because Russia had mobilized its troops on its border. Okay, so then what happens when they declare war on Russia? What's going to happen? Without even reading the board, you all know the alliance system, right? So then Germany, knowing that they're in a terrible position, declares war on France 2 days later on August 3rd, because they figured they might as well declare war because France and Great Britain are going to declare war on them anyways because they're in a treaty with Russia. You see how that works? Then Great Britain, because they know they owe their allegiance to France and Russia, on the next day decide to declare war on Germany. So that is how the war actually starts. Who is to blame for this? This is a trillion upon trillions upon more money ever been made in history question to answer, because there's no right answer. We all know who gets blamed, but who started this thing, who should be blamed for starting this thing, I don't know. It's tough to tell. Why is this a big deal that all these countries declare war on each other? Katie? Had not happened before. Yeah, remember going back to when I said the Congress of Vienna was a big deal in 1815? Because after Napoleon, everyone was like, no, we're never doing this again. No more all-country wars in Europe. Going back to the 30 Years' War, when the Holy Roman Empire was just decimated because they were killing each other with pitchforks over who could be a Protestant and who could be a Catholic. Now they're not fighting over who gets to take the sacrament and who doesn't. Now they're fighting over who's got a bigger bomb than the other one, who's got a bigger machine gun than the other one. And it's a little more dangerous this time after you've had 2 industrial revolutions. That makes sense? What else is Mr. Brunette forgetting to add into this and why it was so dangerous? Think about it. Do these countries control a few areas of the world? Oh, yes. What do they control around the world? What do they control? Colonies. Yeah. Germany has a bunch of colonies in the South Pacific. France controls Indochina, what is now Burma or Myanmar, and Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Obviously, Britain controls land all over the world. And that's going to involve everyone in their colonies. Okay, we got a question. So Serbs and Slavs are the same. Why would BH, that is the Black Hand, want to kill the Archduke that offered Slavs a triple monarchy? That's a great question. The Black Hand was not content with a triple monarchy. And that was a moderate move. And Austria-Hungary never really actually offered that in the first place. The Archduke was in favor of that, but not his father. Also, on top of that, they wanted there to be their own independent country. They weren't cool with what happened to Hungary, where they just got to say that they got to add to their name, but that was all they really had in theory. Okay, good question. All right, we're going to move on here. And we're going to look at how this whole thing started then. So when it all shakes out, take a look at the map up here. It's not that dissimilar or different than the original map we looked at, but you're going to see a small difference here in that Serbia, Romania, Greece go towards what are going to be called the Allied powers, and the Central powers lose Italy, okay, but gain the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. All right, so if you're in your notes and you're writing the Triple Alliance turns into the Central Powers or equals Central Powers, and Triple Entente turns into what are called the Allied Powers. All right, Italy being the flip, and the Ottoman Empire because they relied on German military advisors allying with the Germans. Yes.
Why do they keep the same thing usually they change
You mean for Central Powers? They're actually,
for allied powers?
well, because of the United States. In World War II, it's actually the Axis versus the Allies. Yeah. And we whitewashed history because we won, if I'm honest. We'd probably be called some dirty name if we lost. Right? Yeah. Like we'd be called like the bullies versus the Axis, or something like that. All right. This see who stays neutral. Albania is still a place that's extremely diverse. Switzerland plays the neutral card. They'll remain that way throughout history. All right, so we're going to look at how this whole thing went down then. We're maybe on track here. Yeah, this is one of the more interesting things to me. I got a lot of family from this area. But Germany had planned a two-front war since 1905. So for 10 years, the Germans had figured out that they were probably going to have to fight on their east and western fronts. Now, if you're like me, the first time I heard this, when I was about your age, I raised my hand to my teacher and I said, that's not really fair, is it? Like, why was Germany planning on fighting on two sides before the war even started? Well, their chief general with the last name von Schlieffen famously penned this plan called the von Schlieffen Plan. And here's how it worked. I want you to see this. They were going to pull a pincer move, okay? They were going to go around neutral Belgium and then hit Paris, okay, in a sweeping fashion. Their prediction was that they could take out Belgium because Belgium had no army, really, no military, no defense, and they could invade France. And if they got France to surrender, or Paris to surrender, sorry, then the whole heart of Europe is gone, of France is gone. If you can take Paris, you have the heart of the French people. That was the bet. And they bet that it would take the Russian army 6 months to mobilize. That means get ready to fight because Russia was so backwards. And so what they did then was they built high-speed railroads across Germany. If you look at this second map, that would go into Russia, that once they took out Paris through Belgium, they would then transport 1 million soldiers over to Russia and take out the Russians, and thus they would be basically take over all of Europe. Okay? Everyone see how that works? Again, people don't even understand this in person usually, so it's going to be harder via Zoom. But on the map on the left, go around and down, and then head and send everyone to the right, which is east, into Russia, and you knock it all out at one time. What happens wrong? What stalls? Anybody tell me what stalls? Anybody on Zoom? Ashton?
Not sure. I mean, Belgium has a defense and they like kind of stall the German army.
Yeah, so Ashton said chances are Belgium had some kind of defense, and they did put up a little bit of a fight here. Here's what happens. Belgium had really no defense, but what they did have in their military budget was they built a bunch of bunkers, concrete bunkers underground that slowed the Germans down. Secondly, have you ever tried to move 2 million soldiers in a new industrialized army through a forest? Okay, in an expedient amount of time as possible. Is that going to be easy? No. And so these are medieval roads we're talking about that we're used to having horses going down them that now have cars that are dragging large cannons, and huge groups of people trying to move through Belgium. Do the Germans treat the Belgian people with friendly? No, they're gross. And there's already a lot of stories in newspapers in France and Great Britain about the atrocities that the Germans are committing as they're going through a neutral country. Belgium is neutral, neutral, neutral. Okay? What's so bad about attacking a neutral country? Ashton?
They're not in the war, so I mean they can't attack. I mean,
Well, they're not in the war, so they shouldn't be invaded, should they?
no.
Yeah. So the other issue then is, and some of you may know this already, is that Russia is able to mobilize in less than a month. Whereas the Germans in 1905 had predicted it would take 6 months. And so here's a good picture for you. Okay. Here's a good political cartoon. If you can read it, it says no thoroughfare. You have a little boy. And if you can't read it on the top of his hat, it says Belgium. And he's carrying a very small stick. And there you see an old picture of Otto von Bismarck. And how is his stick compared to Belgium's little stick? Significantly larger. This is also a play on words on Teddy Roosevelt's big stick policy. If you remember right, speak softly and carry a. Anyone hear that quote before? Speak softly and carry a big stick. So the Germans here have a big stick. What's hanging off their pocket here? German bratwursts. Oh, the Krauts. Okay. All right. So if I show you this next picture, then you should get it. What happens here is this is on the map where there's this little square. This is the picture of what I was showing you. Due to the fact that the Russians mobilize and they start to move into this area of land formerly known as Prussia, but is now part of the German Empire, these peasant soldiers from Russia start to feast on Prussian generals, the generals of the army, okay, and the politicians. They start to feast on their pigs. They start to drink their fancy wine and champagne. They take their clothing. They rape their wives and daughters. These are Russian peasants who had never seen anything like this before. Okay, and so those messages get back to the men that are in France that are 30 miles away from Paris, and the German army freaks out, okay, because their castles, their mansions, their family lineage here is on the line as poor Russian serfs and their army are invading Prussia again, where Germany, that was Prussia before Germany, and so they used their high-speed railroads to send 1 million troops over to Russia to stop the Russians. But in the meantime, I think they end up, I want to say 27 miles away from Paris, and it halts. And that's the closest they will get to Paris. Why is that a big deal? Well, most of you, I think, know history repeats itself also. Will the Germans make the mistake in World War II of stopping 27 miles short? No. And some of you are probably saying to yourself, Mr. Brunette, where is Great Britain in this whole thing? Great Britain could not actually get troops into France fast enough to help them. It took a while. And some of you are going, Mr. Brunette, I thought the United States fought in World War I. We did. We only fought in the last year of the war. Okay? We played the neutral card. Anybody know why we played the neutral card? Greed and capitalism. We wanted to make money on both sides. Smart, right? It's all smart until nobody can pay anything back, and then it's not very smart after that. So we'll get into that more later. So what results in this area right here, this little square thing? Okay, what results is this thing called the Western Front, also known as the stalemate. Okay. Most of you, I think, know what a stalemate is. It's when neither side is victorious. And so you end up on the Western Front alone with 35,000 miles of trenches, most of them in modern-day Belgium and France. Basically going from the Mediterranean Sea in France all the way to the English Channel. 35,000 miles. What's that going to do to a country? It's forests, it's farmland, it's cropland, it's animals, it's buildings, it's trees, they're gone. Okay, trenches, look up here. Okay, this is just the example of a trench. Okay, on the bottom would be troops kind of trying to invade, and then further back would be all these support trenches and then long-range artillery behind that. 12,000 miles of these trenches in a line, but then because of the support trenches, 35,000 miles. And this would destroy the French countryside. Okay, put them in a position that it was almost nothing left. It also created quite a bit of death. So one of the most famous battles is called the Battle of Verdun. Let's talk about 1914 real quick. So this stalemate occurs when the von Schlieffen plan fails. And some of you have probably seen the movie where the men exchange cigarettes and sing Christmas carols together and all this stuff in the trenches, and in what's called no man's land. But the reality is most of these men who signed up for the war thought that they were going to be home for Christmas of 1914. Okay? Nobody moved more than 30 miles for 4 years. Okay? That's how much of a stalemate it was, of just trading each other's trenches over and over again. Okay, in the city of Verdun, which is near the Somme, you hear it called the Somme like fairly often, this region, it turned into what we call a war of attrition. That's a vocab word I want you to remember. All right, a war of attrition is a war where basically you try to wear down your enemy at all costs without basically sacrificing anything that you have to win. Okay, called total war and a war of attrition, whoever lasts the longest. Sometimes you'll hear that used in sporting events, like, oh, this is just a battle of attrition. Like maybe if you're watching a basketball game and a bunch of people foul each other over and over again, It's like whoever has any players left with no fouls, or football, whoever has any quarterbacks left that don't have concussion or a broken leg. All right. Maybe you've heard of that. Now, 800,000 men are killed, okay, in less than a calendar year in one spot. One series of trenches, 800,000 men. Imagine what that smelled like. What do you think that smelled like? I can see a couple people. Katya, do you think that smelled bad?
Yeah.
Yeah, real bad. Do you think these people had bathrooms to use who were in these trenches? No. Do you think they had food, adequate food? No. I mean, geez, the technology was so bad they used pigeons to try to communicate and plan when they were going to attack. Literally, one side would shell or bomb for days at a time. They would blow whistles. They would get up out of their trench and try to run to the other side. The other side would sit there, absorb the bombing, stand up with machine guns and just mow each other down to the point where it was just carnage. Okay, here you can see trench warfare in Western France. You'll notice this is early on. It's not that deep. You notice the water, though. Has anyone ever dug a hole in Indiana? What happens when you dig a hole in Indiana? Water fills up with it because the water table to the ground is not that deep. France is pretty similar to Indiana in that sense. Here's another picture for you. Any and all available wood would be used to try to fortify trenches. These men were living out in the open. This is no man's land. Okay, this is an aerial view of what the trenches look like. And then this is an actual picture. This is how it was described. This is a good quote. Some of you can wrap your heads around this. No man's land is pocket marked like the body of foulest disease, and its odor is the breath of cancer. No man's land under snow is like the face of the moon, chaotic, crater-ridden, uninhabitable, awful, the abode of madness. So somebody in 1915 had the wherewithal to call it the breath of cancer. That sounds fairly deadly to me. Not good. Here's another picture for you. There's people sleeping here. I want to see if any of us would survive a year in this situation. I highly doubt it. I'm 99.9% sure my dog would not survive. It's so pampered. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, Shaq does commercials for Gold Bond. Gold Bond was created in World War I. You can see on the bottom left to try to dry people's feet out and hands and limbs. What time do we get out of this place, by the way? 43. Okay. We'll go a little bit more here. So what people would get is what's called trench foot. And this is when your foot is wet for an extended period of time. It's like if you've ever taken a long shower, a long bath, or if you've ever been in a hot tub or pool for a long time, now you start to get a little like pruniness on your hands. Well, over time, your bones will just rot off of your actual, or your skin will rot off your bones. So you can see that in this picture up here in the upper right. Yeah, that looks pretty gnarly, right? Yeah. And that's due to, again, lack of new boots, lack of technology to keep things dry. Pretty gross. Here's another example. This is the one that always gets me. Yeah, it's pretty interesting looking. Nasty. So, that's why when you look at the totals, okay, of people who died in the war, there are more people that are wounded or had to have their arms and legs amputated because of the disease and the living conditions, and they were killed. And imagine you can't come home and work in a factory if you're missing an arm or a leg. So who is going to pay for all these people? That's the question. Okay, here you can see northern France by 1917. What's France going to want? if they win this whole thing, payback. They're gonna want to be paid back. All right. For those of you that are still on here, hopefully you found that riveting. I love this stuff. It's interesting to talk about. I do need to show you something here on the Zoom. So I'm going to try to get rid of this. I'm going to try end show, I think. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to I'm coming here. I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen share over here. I have everything except what I want. All right. This, click back. So somebody got ahead of themselves and said that I had messed up this assignment. So I'm going to double check it. And Google Chrome share. So you can see my, should be able to see my Chrome here. And you don't need to mess around with the soapstone at all. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. But the main causes of World War I, this is our homework tonight. This is due, I got to change it. It should be due tomorrow. The 27th. And hopefully the documents come up formatted okay. But what it is you're going to read the documents in the Google Doc and answer the questions underneath the document. When you are finished, answer the critical thinking question, cite correctly at least 2 of the documents in your answer. So I'm going to open this up just to make sure it works. Should be shareable with everybody. So you're just going to answer these questions here. I tried to make them fairly obvious. These are all like primary sources, essentially. Some of them are secondary sources. And then at the end, I'm trying to get work on using, what are those called? Stimulus-based questions too. So you get practice on those for your tests. Okay. And then at the end here, the question is, which of the 4 main causes of the start of World War I do you think was the strongest cause and why? And then use 2 of the documents that are above to cite your source. So practice writing, a condensed or a mini DBQ, essentially, just working on the citing of the document. And I showed you how I want the document cited there. I feel like I've talked a lot and I want to be done talking. So the other last thing then is the DBQs. If you didn't get a 80 out of 80 on your DBQ, either you didn't turn in a peer edit sheet and you got a 7 out of 7, you're good. If you got a sheet back, like a grade sheet back from me, and it says your DBQ was awesome, it means that you're going to eventually that'll go in as 80 out of 80. If you didn't get a perfect score, I want you to fix it, send it back to me with the grading sheet, and I'll regrade it again. Everyone's going to be writing DBQs until they're perfect. That actual one. And I had a lot of good ones yesterday. I was very happy with the ones I read. And even the ones that were wrong, there wasn't a lot wrong with it. So, all right, Zoomers, feel free to get off here. I understand that's a long class period. Thank you for your participation. Bye-bye. Oh, Lucy, what's up?
I don't think my DBQ ever got graded by you.
Yeah, I only graded like 14 yesterday. I didn't get 10 yet.
Okay, bye.
I got to what I could because the training thing lasted 9 years. So,
Yeah. Okay, well, bye.
all right, thanks. See ya. Bye-bye. Yes.